One fellow stopped me a minute ago, and one of us, and he asked if I would speak about aging because he's working in a nursing home and is interested in tell me if I get it wrong, the greening of aging? The greening of elder care. That's a nice one. I like that.
Welcome. I'm Angus. I also go by Angus by design, and I'm so glad we found this moment to be together. We are beginning a journey through Polishing the Mirror by Ram Dass and Rameshwar Das. We aren't here as teachers or students, helpers or those needing help. We are here as peers on a path, practicing the only dance there is. We are fellow explorers. Our goal is simple, to quiet the mind and open the heart so we can be in deeper service, Seva, to one another and to the world. So, our grounding practice, just take a moment to settle. If it feels right, close your eyes or let them just rest gently on a single spot. Feel the weight of your body where you are sitting. This is our inner refuge. Bring your hand to your chest, to the spiritual heart. And as we breathe, imagine we're gently wiping the dust off the mirror. We aren't trying to change the mirror. We're just clearing the way. So our true nature can shine through. And take one deep breath in and then let it go. So we're here. We are together. So far in chapter 1, we took a look at the path of the heart, moving from the ego story to the soul. Chapter 2 was living in the spirit, bringing mindfulness into the mundane. And we took a look at what small ways we can serve someone today without them knowing it. And then chapter 3, suffering as grace, and using our difficulties as grist for the mill. And we reflected on how our own lived experience became a tool to help others. And then chapter 4, aging and changing and embracing the flow of life and transitions. And we reflected on how we can walk each other home through times of change. And then yesterday, or well, for me, it was literally yesterday. But it was conscious living and dying. So being present with the great mystery, and our practice about how, facing our fears allows us to be more present for those in pain. And then uh, chapter 6, we're going to look at from suffering to grace. And again, we can revisit the Seva practice of karma yoga, so the yoga of action and selfless service. And our reflection could be, how can we serve without attachment to the outcome? Chapter 6, From Suffering to Grace. There are times when each of us has to bear the unbearable. It may come as physical pain, illness, or emotional suffering of our own, of someone dear to us, or of our other sentient beings. Can you respond to suffering without closing down and still keep your heart open? It seems almost instinctive to use your mind to protect your heart, to rationalize the suffering, to avoid the pain or discomfort. But then you cut yourself off from true compassion for yourself and others. Most of us armor our hearts when dealing with the immensity of suffering that exists in the world. We look at all the people who are starving when we have just finished a big breakfast and we turn away. We feel like there is nothing we can do, and we can't bear to see the suffering. Armoring the heart is the opposite of opening the heart. You know the feeling of loving another person. You know how that love feeds you. Love is how we feed each other. But when you experience overwhelming suffering, you close your heart defensively. Your heart may feel protected and less vulnerable, but it is also deadened to the process. Armoring the heart cuts off the living spiritual interchange of energy that exists in the universe and that nourishes the spirit in all of us. We all fear suffering. People find the world scary because they become overwhelmed by the suffering around them, their own and everybody else's. In any major city in the United States, there are homeless people sleeping in doorways. And it's one thing to experience this in India. In Calcutta, it seems like half the population lives on the street. But in the affluent United States, it's bizarre that some people live so well and some are so poor. It feels like we should be able to get it together enough to provide everybody with at least shelter, food, and clothing. Are we turning away because our minds are closing off our hearts to the suffering of others? I deal with the immensity of the suffering all around me by cultivating more than one plane of consciousness, by witnessing and by acknowledging the laws of the universe. When I can arrive at a perceptual vantage point where I look at a leaf or a drop of water or stars and planets and see the oneness of existence, I can begin to see the exquisite interrelationship of phenomena. I can find universal law in each field I examine: physics, astronomy, music, genetics, mathematics, chemistry, from that point of view of oneness. I can't help being filled with awe at the magnificence of how it all works. I also realize that suffering is part of the way it all works. Why is there suffering? After the Buddha's enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, he expounded to his new disciples what came to be known as the Four Noble Truths. The first noble truth says that all existence is characterized by suffering. Birth has in it suffering. Death has in it suffering. Old age has in it suffering. And sickness has in it suffering. Not getting what you want has in it suffering. Getting what you don't want has in it suffering. Even getting what you do want or not getting what you don't want involves suffering, both because both are in time. Anything in time is impermanent. Jesus said, "Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt." As long as you are caught up in time, there is suffering. The second and third noble truths deal with the causes of suffering, which are the clinging of mind to attractions and aversions, and to a false sense of self. The fourth noble truth lays out the eightfold path to get free of suffering, the way of grace. I deeply honor the Buddha, and I have studied Buddhism a lot and practice much Buddhist meditation. But my particular spiritual path is through my Guru Maharaji. The Guru reflects our deepest self. Indeed, when fully known, the Guru is our deepest self, and that is who we see when we polish the mirror of our being. My relationship with Maharaji is one of faith. That faith allows me to see everything that comes my way as His grace. Just remembering that everything is His grace is itself grace, but sometimes it doesn't come easy. On February 19th, 1997, I suffered a severe hemorrhagic hemorrhagic stroke, a bleed rather than a blockage. I had been working on a book about aging, and I was lying in bed trying to imagine what it would be like to be old and sick and suffering when I had a massive stroke. The phone rang. I tried to get out of bed to answer it, and I fell onto the floor. I was paralyzed on one side. I managed to reach the phone and pick up the receiver, but I was unable to speak. My friend calling from New Mexico realized something was wrong and asked me to tap on the phone if I needed help, which I did. Within a few minutes, my secretaries Marlene and Joanne appeared soon, followed by paramedics. I remember being wheeled into the hospital on a gurney. During those first few days, no one knew if I would survive. The news of my stroke traveled fast, even to India. Prayer circles around the country were sending me healing energy. The people surrounding me, the doctors and nurses, my friends and relatives, all wore long faces. They kept saying, "Oh, you poor guy, you've had a stroke." As I absorbed their mindsets, I started to think I was a poor guy, just another stroke victim. They were projecting the full view of a stroke as a medical disaster onto me. It was coming from almost everybody except the cleaning woman. Whenever she came into my room, she was totally present with me. She knew. Before my stroke, I felt like I had a life of grace because I was under the protective umbrella of my guru. The stroke shattered my faith in that protection. I felt I had fallen out of grace. I had lost faith and I got very depressed for a while. I would look at the picture of my guru on the hospital wall and say, "Where were you when I had this stroke? Were you out to lunch?" For the first 2 months, I was almost totally dependent and suffering, physically, psychologically, and spiritually. I sat in my hospital bed, attempting to make sense of what happened. On one hand, there was a stroke. On the other hand, there was Maharaji's grace. How did this stroke fit in with his grace? Slowly, things began to shift. I started thinking about the stroke in different ways. Could this stroke be grace in any way? Awful grace? It certainly wasn't helping my ego, but could it possibly benefit my soul? The effects of the stroke included aphasia, paralysis, and dependence on others. Attempting to perceive it, I tried to find out where the grace might be hidden. After all, this was still Maharaji's play, his Leela. I was trying to figure out Maharaji's grace in the stroke, how the sickness was going to help me get to God. Early on, I was markedly aphasic, unable to speak at all. Learning to speak again was hard. Words came slowly. I had to learn to deal with silence. A great boon spiritually because force it forced my mind to be quiet. I had to go beyond my intellect into the silence of my intuitive heart. As I became more absorbed in the heart, I found it to be a place where separation disappears and knowledge gives way to wisdom. About a year and a half after my stroke, I started speaking again publicly. It's good motivation for your speech therapy to have 500 people waiting for you to get your words out. When I would lecture before the stroke, there would always be one or two people in the audience who had been dragged to hear me speak by a spouse or a friend. It was easy to pick them out of the crowd. They'd be sitting with their arms folded and their faces wearing a long-suffering look. I'd work hard to help them open their hearts. Now my wheelchair opened their hearts. And because of the wheelchair, I was always assured of having a seat wherever I wanted. The stroke taught me about dependency. I went from being the driver of a sports car to a passenger. I was in a body now that, I was in a body that now needed help from others. As a passenger, I could appreciate the passing trees and clouds in a way I couldn't when I had to pay attention to traffic. I had written a book called How Can I Help with Paul Gorman. Now I needed to write one called How Can You Help Me? Since the stroke, I have been deeply humbled by the compassion of other beings. I am blessed to have such wonderful people taking care of me. Now they take care of my body, and together we take care of each other's souls. Changing your point of view. As I see it, we have three vantage points or planes of consciousness. from which we live. The first is the ego, the plane of personality. The second is our individual soul, part of which is the witness consciousness we talked about earlier. The third is the mystic part of us. Quakers call it the still small voice within, or the higher, or the inner light. Hindus call it the Atman. We can also think of it as the One. Each of us has all three of these channels. They are here simultaneously, but how you experience reality depends on which one your awareness is tuned into. When you dwell deep in the intuitive self, you are on the soul plane. If you follow that awareness and go in, you will come to God awareness, to the Atman. The same awareness is in you and in me. God consciousness is the same in all of us. While we think we are our incarnation, our soul witnesses it all and ultimately connects us to the universal God consciousness that dwells within each of us. These days, I see myself as a soul who has taken incarnation in a body that suffered a stroke. So while my ego thought I was a person with a stroke, that suffering pushed me into my soul, which witnesses or watches the incarnation. It's much less painful to watch the stroke than to have the stroke. I have pains throughout my body. I list them for my doctors, but I don't identify with them. I identify with being a witness of pain. Physical pain is in the body, and I am not my body. My body is out there, and I am in here. Pain is part of the body. Now, if we're talking about psychological pain, that is from the ego, which is also out there. I remember I am my consciousness, my awareness. I am inside and I live with the pain, not as the pain, but with the pain. That is another way the stroke proved beneficial. It pushed me into my soul. Instead of leaving me wallowing in the physical problems of my incarnation, it gave me a leg up and took me into my soulness. Is it suffering or is it grace? Recall the story from the Ramayana in which Ravana, the demon king, kidnaps Sita, the earth mother or the soul who is married to God, Ram. He carries her away to the demon capital on the island of Sri Lanka. As the army of monkeys and bears arrives at the ocean shore in India looking for Sita, Jambavan, the king of the bears, reminds Hanuman that he has divine powers. Then Hanuman takes his great leap of faith and flies over the ocean to find Sita. As I struggled in my mind to accept this stroke, a message came from a dear friend in India. In the same way that Hanuman needed to be reminded of his power, my friend KK saw in India felt I should be reminded of the power of my faith. KK wrote some simple words that Maharaji said to him about me. I will do something for him. Just that remembrance was enough to recall my faith. My soul was once again enveloped in Maharaji's blanket of love. Siddhi Ma, the mother in India who maintains Maharaji's ashrams, saw Mickey Lemley's documentary film about me and the stroke, which was called Fierce Grace. In the film, I talked about trying to see the stroke as Maharaji's grace. She sent me a message that Maharaji would never give me a stroke. I finally realized that the stroke was the natural result of my own karma. Maharaji's grace lay in helping me deal with the effects of the stroke. It is true that being able to deal with the suffering from the stroke changed my life. I certainly wouldn't wish a stroke on anyone, but mine has had a positive side. Although I lost my faith for a while, over time it has been tempered and deepened. Although for a time I was overwhelmed by the suffering, eventually I found a place in myself that has faith that this stroke is part of my awakening. That was the grace. Living with both the perfection and the pain of the suffering allows me to stay with the pain without pushing it away because I have that balance within myself. I'm part of the unfolding of it all, and that includes suffering. When Phyllis, my stepmother, was dying, the pain she went through forced her to give up clinging to her body and led her to spiritual awakening during the first few days before she died. I wouldn't have given her that pain, but who am I to judge? As a human being with the emotional heart, I am faced with the paradox that I want to relieve suffering. While at the same moment, there is another part of me that understands that sometimes there is grace in suffering. From a spiritual point of view, suffering is sometimes the sandpaper that awakens people. Once you start to awaken spiritually, you reperceive your own suffering and start to work with it as a vehicle for further awakening. When you suffer, the suffering seems to envelop your world. Think of a framed picture of a cloud. If the picture is cropped too closely, you see only the gray of the cloud. If the picture is cropped to a wider angle, you see the blue sky all around it. That's grace. Faith. The whole game is based on faith. Faith comes through grace. In the Bible, the Apostle Paul says, "For it is by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not from yourselves, it is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast." When the faith is strong enough, it is sufficient just to be. Without faith, the existential fears and uncertainties that we have all dominate. If you have faith, you have no fear. If you don't have faith, you fear. As I questioned my own faith after the stroke, I began to ask, faith in what? I found that my faith is the one, not faith in Maharaji as a person, but faith in him as a doorway to the one. Faith in the one as faith in the one in Maharaji. Oneness is a state of being. Again, this is the state where, as the great South Indian saint Ramana Maharshi said, God, Guru, and Self are one. Maharaji simply held up one finger and said, Sabek, it's all one. Faith is the reflection of that oneness in the mirror of your soul. Faith is the way that you connect to that universal truth of oneness. Faith and love are intimately entwined. As it says in the Ramayana, without devotion, there is no faith. Without faith, there is no devotion. Faith is not a belief. Beliefs are in the head. Faith is in the heart. Faith comes from within you. You cultivate it by opening your spiritual heart and quieting your mind until you feel your identity with your deeper self. That opening to the deeper self, when you have quieted your mind, comes through grace. The qualities of that self are peace, joy, compassion, wisdom, and love. It's all perfect. Having been in the presence of Maharaji, I have come to trust the way a being like a being like that is in the universe. It's like knowing somebody who lives a little further up the mountain and can see farther up than you can. The view from there is perfection, not perfection as something to be achieved, but perfection in what is. Maharaji kept saying to me in various ways, Ram Dass, don't you see it's all perfect? And yet Maharaji spent all his life being there for people, helping them with their lives, feeding them, and just loving them. The art of life is to stay wide open and be vulnerable, yet at the same time to sit with the mystery and the awe and with the unbearable pain, to just be with it all. I've been growing into that wonderful catchphrase, be here now, for the last 40 years. Here and now has within it a great richness that is just enough. If somebody asks me, Ram Dass, are you happy? I stop and look inside. Yes, I'm happy. Ram Dass, are you sad? Yes, I'm sad. Answering those questions, I realize that all of those feelings are present. Imagine the richness of a moment in which everything is present. The pain of a broken heart, the joy of a new mother holding her baby, the exquisiteness of a rose in bloom, the grief of losing a loved one. The moment has all of that. It is just living truth. The saving grace is being able to witness suffering from the perspective of the soul. Another way to say that is that the living, or another way to say it is that the living grace is having faith. Living in the fullness of the moment with joy and suffering, witnessing it in all its perfection. Our hearts still go out to those who are suffering. If we live in the moment, we are not in time. If you think I'm a retired person, I'm retired from my role, you are looking back at your life. It's retrospective. It's life in the rearview mirror. If you're young, you might be thinking, I have my whole life ahead of me. This is what I'll do later. That kind of thinking is called time binding. It causes us to focus on the past or the future and to worry about what comes next. Getting caught up in memories of the past or worrying about the future is a form of self-imposed suffering. Either retirement or youth can be seen as moving on, a time for something different, something new. Start fresh. It's a new moment. Aging is not accumulation or a culmination. Youth isn't preparation for later. This isn't the end of the line or the beginning. Now isn't a time to look back or plan ahead. It's time just to be present. The present is timeless. Being in the moment, just being here with what is ageless, eternal. It is extraordinary how near we are to our deepest being. It's just a thought away. And the thoughts that take us away from it create so much suffering. The thought, I am this body, causes suffering. I might think, well, my body used to be able to do this. My hair didn't used to be gray. I used to be stronger. I used to be thinner. I used to be. Those thoughts cause suffering because the body is what it is. We do everything we can to stay safe and healthy, but illness, age, and accidents still affect us. Maharaji said, no one has the power even to keep their own body safe. The Buddha is right. This body is in time, but we are just here in this moment, giving, caring. If you have had the grace to touch living spirit in your lifetime, you know it can be a challenge to translate it into action in the world. To put it another way, now that you know that home is where the heart is, how do you live your life in such a way as to deepen your spiritual connection? There are many paths of prayer, of study, of redirecting bodily energies in the hatha yoga of devotional singing and kirtan. Many of us are strongly drawn to a path of service, the kind of service designed to alleviate the suffering of our fellow beings. Service in deep harmony with the way of things, the Dharma. When it is guided by the heart, such service feels like making love with God. Think of Mother Teresa, seeing her beloved Jesus in all his distressing disguises. Giving and receiving, depending on how they're done, can nourish people on both ends.